In the last few years, we've all been through something that completely changed the world, the COVID-19 pandemic. It wasn't just a health crisis, was it? It felt like this global moment of reckoning that left so many of us searching for some kind of meaning, for context, and, for hope. So let's dive into this source material that tries to find exactly that by connecting our very recent history to one of the most mysterious and, let's be honest, intimidating books ever written.
So, we have to start with the facts, with a number that grounds us in that shared reality. The official confirmed global death toll from the pandemic is over 7 million people. It's just a staggering figure.
But, as the source we're examining points out, that number doesn't even tell the whole story. When you look at what's called excess mortality, the estimated true toll might be more than double that. We're talking over 14 million lives lost. Behind every single one of those numbers is a story, a family, a community that's been changed forever.
Now, the author of our source isn't just bringing this up to dwell on the loss. It's actually the opposite. They're using this very real, very modern tragedy to frame a much, much larger and much older perspective. Let's see how they build this out.
And here's the crucial point. It's all about context. The author's argument is that if a pandemic claiming millions of lives could bring our modern world to its knees, well, it helps us just begin to wrap our minds around the scale of events that are prophesied in the Bible. It becomes a reference point for something that's otherwise almost impossible to comprehend.
And this is the scale they're talking about. The book of Revelation speaks of a judgment where a quarter of humanity perishes. Think about that. In today's numbers, that will be roughly 2 billion people. It's a figure that just dwarfs even the worst of our recent experiences, and that is exactly the author's point.
So you might be wondering, why present these absolutely terrifying figures? Well, according to the source, it's because the common understanding of Revelation as just this book of doom and gloom completely misses the point. The author argues that there's a much deeper message there that most people just overlook.
And this is where it gets really interesting. On one hand, you've got the popular view, right? That it's all about terror and destruction. But the author's view completely flips that narrative on its head. They argue that Revelation is ultimately a story of victory and of rescue, not just wrath.
This really gets to the heart of the whole argument. The source states directly that all the judgment and destruction, that's not the final word. The author describes it more like the labor pains before the birth of something totally new, a restored creation. So the focus, they argue, should be on the victory that comes at the end of the story.
Okay, so where do they find this hope? Well, the author points to these specific threads that are woven all the way through the book. For instance, there's this vision of a great multitude from every single nation who are saved, which shows you its global reach. Then you've got these very specific promises of rewards for people who stay faithful through all the hardship. And then there's the big one, the promise of an ultimate restoration of all creation. And, critically, an invitation for anyone to find salvation, an invitation that stays open right until the very end.
So, building on that idea of restoration, the source then gets into the specifics of what this promised future is actually supposed to look like. It's not about escaping from reality, but about making it perfect.
This is the foundational promise that the source highlights, a future where the very things that define so much of our human suffering, death, grief, pain, are just gone, completely eliminated. It's a promise of total restoration and peace.
Let's break that down for a second. The author puts a huge emphasis on what will be gone forever. No more death, no more grief, no more pain. Even the curse that's mentioned way back in the book of Genesis is said to be lifted, ending this broken state of the world we're in.
And what takes its place? Well, the source paints this incredible picture of a new reality, one that's defined not by what's missing, but by what's there. God's glory itself is the source of light, the return of the symbolic tree of life, relationships made perfect and free from conflict, and a meaningful existence filled with purposeful work and community. Okay, so we've gone from the pandemic scale to the source's interpretation of biblical prophecy, but this is where the material takes a really sharp personal turn. We're getting into the author's own anecdotal evidence for all these claims.
And this is the natural question, isn't it? A beautiful, hopeful vision of the future is one thing, but how can anyone really trust that it's real? The author tries to answer this with a story that's deeply, deeply personal.
The author presents what they call a living testimony, and this revolves entirely around their brother, a man named Darren John Chard. The central claim is that despite his physical death, Darren's consciousness not only survived but continues to interact with the living.
And the claims made in the source are incredibly specific. The author states that Darren has physically manifested to witnesses, that he has communicated verifiable prophetic information, that they continue to have daily communication, and that his knowledge has actually expanded since his passing.
So here's the crucial connection. The author puts this personal experience forward not just as a source of comfort, but as empirical living proof. The logic is this: if their brother's consciousness survived death, then the biblical promises of resurrection and eternal life that you find in Revelation must also be trustworthy.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together now. We've got the shared trauma of a global pandemic, a complete reinterpretation of biblical prophecy, and this very personal testimony that's being presented as proof. The source uses all of this to build towards one final, urgent conclusion.
So the author basically boils down the entire purpose of Revelation into these 4 parts. See, it's not just a warning. It's a warning that comes with an offer of salvation, a promise of total restoration, and the declaration of ultimate victory over evil and death.
This quote brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? The source uses the biggest lesson from the pandemic, our shared painful understanding of how fragile life is, to really hammer home the urgency of the message. The illusion that we're in control was shattered for a lot of us, reminding us that the future is never guaranteed.
And so, it all comes down to a choice. The author doesn't just present information. They frame it as a personal decision with eternal consequences. According to the source, the choice is simple: either accept the hope that's being offered or refuse it.
So we'll end with the final question posed by the source material itself. It's a direct, provocative question designed to make the reader, and in this case you, the viewer, reflect on everything that's been presented and leave you to consider that choice for yourself.